Hi, Miss.
Hi, Stace.
Hi, listeners, and welcome to the Digestible Podcast, where we give you all the health and wellness information that you need in an amount of time that your busy day can handle. And we make it easily digestible. Get it? Missy's giggling, and
I'm
I'm
giggling
giggling. Why are we giggling, Miss?
because you lost the coin toss.
Yes.
You get to read this intro, this bio for our lovely new friend Ellen.
Oh my gosh, we love Ellen so much.
Yeah.
But there are two words in this bio that are hard to pronounce. Maybe you can pick them out. But I'm going to do her bio, and you guys can try and figure out which words were hard to pronounce for me.
All right, and this is a great episode because we talked today about bread, because everyone loves bread, and this Ellen talks about it in a way that makes it appealing. We can have bread again. We can have bread again.
We can have bread again, unless you have celiac, then you can't. So
No, I'm sorry.
we're not giving you that advice.
No.
But the interesting thing is that I love Ellen's Bakery and bread, as you will hear throughout this episode. But I was unaware of how much we were actually really going to learn from her. She is like such a fountain of knowledge. It was amazing. I mean, there was
Yes.
we could have gone on for hours.
And we're excited for you to hear it.
Absolutely. But first, we are excited to bring to you today Ellen King. She is the co-owner and director of baking operations at Hewn, an award-winning bakery in Evanston, Illinois. A classically trained chef, Ellen first learned bread baking at Quillisasket Farm School before going on to specialize in heritage grains and artisan methods at Hewn. She and her partner Julie opened Hewn in Evanston 2013. They have been recognized in the New York Times, Saveur, Chicago Magazine, Forbes, and InStyle. They have also been featured as the best bakery in the Midwest by Midwest Living and one of 10 best bakeries in the United States by Food and Wine. She is the author of the book Heritage Baking and a member of the Bread Bakers Guild of America, bringing deep expertise to the craft and making bread the way it was meant to be. And we are so excited for this conversation.
Enjoy.
Ellen, thank you for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Of course. Okay, so there's so much to unpack here. Let's start with, before we dig into sourdough and all the wonderfulness of it, I don't know if everyone's aware of how much garbage is in regular grocery store bread. That's kind of how this all started for me, was reading the labels of grocery store bread and the sugars and the oils and all of the conditioners and things. So could you explain to us the difference between like regular bread, sourdough style bread, and sourdough bread?
Sure. Yeah. So I think first off, it starts with the ingredients. So the flour used. And commonly in grocery store bread, the flour that they're using is not so great. So it's either very white or it could be whole wheat, but it's not like 100% pure whole wheat. They'll add other things into it. And sometimes the wheat, often commercial wheat, is grown with glyphosate in it. So you'll have residue of that on all of your grain. And for me, that's kind of the starting point because that's a toxin to your body. I think it's why I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I think, in my opinion, that's why people have gluten sensitivities, is because your body's actually responding to something toxic that's going into it. So then once you have the flours, then in commercial grocery store breads, they'll add oils, they'll add different preservatives to it. Sometimes there's a little bit of sugar. There's just a lot of more additives. Like if you look at the typical ingredient list of bread, honestly, it should be 4 ingredients and that's it. And so unless you're buying a bread with seeds, and then it'll have the name of the seeds. But if you see breads and all of a sudden you start seeing oils and you start seeing words that you really don't understand, it's literally probably something you shouldn't eat. And so then if we morph into sourdough style, to be honest, I really don't know what that is, except sometimes they'll say, oh, it's sourdough. And I look at the bread and I know that it didn't go through a natural fermentation. They may add a little bit of sourdough to it. They're still going to add some instant yeast. And then there's going to be some other additives into it, because if you're doing 100% sourdough bread, then it literally is 4 ingredients. And so like our sourdough bread and other sourdough bakeries across the country, that are really doing that. It's the ingredients should be flour. So, like on our flour, we don't list it as organic flour because, to be honest, the farmers we work with, some of them haven't gone through a certification process, and we can go and unpack that later. But we know how it's grown. We know it doesn't have glyphosate in it. We know that they're growing it sustainably. And so it'll have flour, then it has water, then it has the starter, and then it has the sea salt. In kind of that order is the order of the ingredients with the volume in it. So if you're looking at something and it says sourdough style, and if you see oil or anything in there, it's probably not something that you're going to want to eat. I mean, you can eat it. I eat bread. I do eat other bread when I'm traveling, but it's not as a whole. I try to avoid that.
Yeah. Well, your bread has ruined all other bread for me, so I will say that. But
Yeah.
we'll get to your bakery in a little bit. A bunch of years ago, I started paying attention to the labels on the bread for my children's sake because they ate a lot of sandwiches. And so I was like, okay. So I had kind of gotten it to a place where I could get them grocery store bread that maybe was sweetened with honey and didn't have hydrogenated oils, but there still was a lot of junk in there. And I noticed once I was out to breakfast at like one of like the local breakfast places, and they're like, "Would you like some toast?" And I'm on the gluten sensitive side, so I don't usually choose toast. But I'm like, "What kind do you have?" They're like, "Oh, we have sourdough." I'm like, "Oh, I'll have some sourdough." And I got it, and I'm like, "This is not sourdough." And so then I started realizing you could go to stores and there's a sourdough style. So I don't know what that means, but it's not sourdough.
No, yeah, I think it honestly, since there's no real standards in this country for like what our breads are, I think sourdough style means that they might add a small percentage of sourdough into it, and then the rest of it is instant yeast with other things in it.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was all about.
Yeah.
So what benefits does sourdough bread offer us? Does it have health benefits?
I mean, I think, again, not a doctor, but it is a fermentation process that it goes through, right? So the thing that happens with the sourdough bread in particular is it's a long fermentation process. So what that means is that the yeast is actually eating the sugars that's in the flour. I know that you're like, wait, there's sugar in flour. There is that the yeast eats. And so as it's eating that, it's converting that. And it's also breaking down, it's kind of developing gluten, but it's also doing part of the digestion for you. So when you go and eat like a naturally fermented bread, thank all the yeast that's helped kind of move this process along the way to make it easier for you to digest. And so
the bacteria is still alive in a baked sourdough bread?
When you bake it, it dies. But the process so that it did at the front end of like digesting some of the gluten and helping develop it. And
while
eating some of the
while the
sugars.
starter is like fermenting, it's breaking down. It's doing some pre-digestion for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. I didn't know that.
Thank you for clarity. Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it was a fermented food product, but I didn't know where exactly in the process that was helping us.
Yeah, it's not like
gut.
a kimchi or raw sauerkraut where you still have all of the probiotics alive and everything, but you have this product that's been essentially like along the way broken down a little bit for you, and then you're eating this with this long fermentation process. So you're not getting this spike that you get if you use instant yeast, and then that's why sometimes they'll add sugars into it as well, is to try and like help give the yeast something to eat in addition to the flour. Baking is chemistry.
Right. And Ellen, it sounds a lot more complicated to make a sourdough bread than a traditional bread. Why did you choose to make sourdough?
Well, honestly, it's funny because it's just the kind of bread that I liked. I don't know that it was definitely not for like, I'm not going to say it wasn't like for nutrition. I don't know that I was as aware, probably 20 years ago when I was eating breads just as like a culinary student and that. But I think for me, it's the most kind of historically pure way to make bread. It's like it goes back to this is how bread was always made. And this is kind of like the way for me it felt. It was the bread I like to eat. It was the most authentic. And then, once I had access to really good flour, then this became like a natural. And the bread, when you use instant yeast, it's just a totally different beast. Like the easiest way to tell is when you cut open a loaf of bread and you look at the crumb, if there's a lot of irregular, some very big holes, some kind of smaller, if it's totally irregular, you know that it's most likely 100% sourdough. If you start seeing uniform interiors where the holes are a little bit smaller or they look consistent, there's going to be instant yeast or not 100% sourdough in there.
Another thing I didn't know. Very
Wow.
cool. Thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
great. Maybe our listeners are going, aha, like I am.
I mean, I have always wanted to make sourdough. The idea frightens me so much. So I'm like, I am just going to be a lifelong purchaser of your sourdough. But why is it so intimidating? And for me, I think part of it is like the responsibility of keeping this starter alive, feeding it every day.
Right.
It sounds like a pet.
It does.
It is like a pet, but it is a pet that you can like put in the refrigerator and not feed for 2 weeks, so like it's, you like this, the starter is a lot more forgiving than people think.
Okay.
But I understand the hesitation because it's a commitment. It's not just a commitment to the starter. It's also a commitment to, the bread. It's not fast, right? So like the learning curve, I think is like, at the front end, it takes a lot to learn how to make this bread. But then once you do, then it's very easy and you kind of don't even think about it. But you have to invest some serious time into it in the beginning and be patient. And I think one of the biggest things is just kind of like allowing yourself to fail. I think like in our country, in the world, and maybe it's just human nature, you don't like to fail. And you just like, if you're repeatedly failing, especially on something that you've probably put 10 days to get the starter up and then 48 hours really from start to bake on a loaf, and then it doesn't work, you just feel so defeated. So I think if you just kind of like pack failure into it as like the expectation is you're going to fail for
like
probably
with gardening.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Little
It's a
things that
shorter
don't
time
work out.
frame.
Certain things
That's
work,
it.
other things don't. I've tasted different sourdoughs, and some of them, there's this place in town that I love their little bread twists or whatever, but when we buy loaves of bread, their sourdough is very sour. Is it just that they're using more sourdough in their mix?
No, it's probably not. The ratio is probably the same but what they're allowing it to do is, I mean, there's many things that can affect the kind of like that really sour flavor. Is one, it depends on like, are they using their starter? Like there's a point where it does like a float test. So you feed your starter and then about 3 hours later, if it's in a room of 76 degrees, you'll put a little bit of that starter in a bowl and it'll float. And that's like the most active point of the starter. That's where we like to use it. And so you're kind of getting the acids really balanced at that point. Now, if it's a really sour, it could be that they're letting their starter ripen a lot longer and then they are using that. And so that transfers into the end product.
Okay.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
There's so much science to this.
There is.
There's so much science, there's so many variables, and I am by far not an expert,
I mean, you're kind of an expert. You like have a bunch of bakeries and a book and like, yeah, I think you're kind of an expert.
You must have found that sweet spot.
I think we know like what works for our bakery, for our customers, for our staff. Yeah, and I mean, maybe in that regard,
And your
I have
bread
knowledge.
is delicious. I'm a total
thank you.
like bread snob now.
Stacey brought it for a family trip. She brought it with her, and it was great. Yeah, it was great. Well, could you tell us a little bit more about the heritage grains?
Yeah. So, when we started out, it was really difficult to get locally sourced flour in Illinois, which to me was just like, that tells you the state of farming in our country, because Illinois in particular is the home of literally grains. I mean, we had the best farmland. It's where all the major farming equipment was manufactured and created in the 1840s in the Chicago region. And so when I came back from Seattle, it was really hard to connect directly with farmers that were growing grains. And so one of the things that I've been lucky to do is meet farmers like Harold from Janie's Organic Farm, Andy Hazard from Hazard Free, and Hallie and John that run Meadowlark in Wisconsin. And so when I started making partnerships with the farmers, we were able to kind of start talking about heritage grains. Some of them had been growing them, but really didn't have a market for them. And so like, oh gosh, what was it? It was probably like 2015 that I worked with Andy Hazard to kind of just like do a test case of like, how can we grow, like bring back a variety that maybe hasn't been around for, 100 years? And Andy was totally game to like get a kilo of seeds. And then it took her, because I just had the easy part of testing it, but 3 years to go from 1 kilo of seeds to about 3,000 pounds of seeds. So like 2.2 pounds to 3,000. That's how long it takes to regenerate the seed stock from a small amount. Now, the thing about heritage grains is those are in like my definition and definition when I've spoken to different agronomists, is anything kind of pre-World War II. So prior to World War II, the varieties that were being used are kind of the older, the true heritage wheats. Now there's something called modern heritage, where after World War II, they started taking some of the attributes from the true heritages and combining them with other types of flour to kind of create things that would grow in different regions. Now that's not like anything new. Farmers have been doing that for thousands of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get a grain that maybe they brought in from Eastern Europe, they bring it to Kansas, and then it starts kind of like mixing. Now I know I'm going way in depth, but it's, that's why I think it's okay.
Yeah, we like
it.
it.
Yeah, it's so hard to just be like, oh, this is a heritage grain. You have to like understand that there's probably over 100,000 varieties of wheat. And there's characteristics. It's like wine. It literally is, where certain varieties will grow really well in some regions. We started working with the heritage grains that worked really well in the Midwest that the farmers themselves felt comfortable growing. So like red fife, we use a lot of. Turkey red, we use a lot of. We'll use some einkorn, which is, that's actually ancient. The einkorn is like, if you think about like the source of kind of everything, it's einkorn. Now, einkorn,
With that one,
go ahead.
very, very fine. And I had trouble getting like the stuff we baked to not to cook through all the way because it was so dense.
It's so dense. So yeah, the thing with einkorn is it does not have as much gluten. It is also very dense, and if it's milled complete, meaning it has all of the bran and germ in there, it's going to be a very dense grain. So like what we do with einkorn is we make like the Midwest blend bread. So it'll be like 50% einkorn flour, 30% spelt, and 20% of like a red fife. So I don't like einkorn as 100%. I feel like it works much better if it's kind of, an accent with some other varieties.
Good to know. That's good to know. So we had someone on the show recently to talk about supplements, and he talks about the different varieties. And it makes sense that you have a variety, a heritage variety that works well in the Midwest if you're going to plant it and farm it in the Midwest. But on top of that, and Ellen, stop me if this wasn't part of your decision-making process, but the heritage blends were typically more utilized for their flavor and their nutrition content versus what's been happening since World War II, when the focus was more on yield, which were varieties that would just produce a lot and not necessarily consider the things like flavor and quality of the grain. Did you find that was part of the conversation?
I mean, it definitely, like when I spent time researching, I was up at UW-Madison in their library for farming, and I was reading a lot of farm journals from the turn of the century and the late 1800s. And, the flavor characteristic is definitely profiled in the old farm journals. And so for us even, there is a flavor difference. Yeah. So it's, farmers were growing because this flavor was nuttier. It was subtle. It was a subtler flavor. It also, obviously farmers are very practical. It grew really well in their region, and it did have an okay yield. Now, an okay yield at the turn of the century before World War II is vastly different than a yield after World War II. So yeah, after World War II, it became all about yield. It became all about also, basically having the wheat not lodge, so tip over. So you started to get a little bit more of the dwarf varieties of wheat that we got from Japan. After World War II, they were growing dwarf varieties. So once we started to play with it and go for yield, not flavor, that's when everything in farming changed, where then we had to start using synthetic inputs for weeds, right? Because traditionally wheat grows really tall and it blocks out the weed growth from down below. Once we started doing dwarf varieties, the sun, the wheat wasn't blocking out the sun from the weeds, so they were competing. So then now you have to add this input to kill the weeds. So
So
yeah.
the motivations behind Yeah, the motivations behind the varieties you chose changed, and so the varieties you chose became
Yeah, I mean,
different.
I would love to
So,
say, oh, we picked this variety because of this flavor profile. We didn't do that starting out because we didn't have that luxury. We didn't have dozens to choose from as a palette, right? So we went with more like, what do we know from the archives that grew in our region and why? And let's grow that. And then from that, some of the farmers were actually already growing these varieties. Just they were growing it because they liked it. Sometimes they just grew the wheat. They didn't have a market for it. Now, Harold, he's got such a volume of his farm. So Harold farms the wheat, but he also mills it. And that is something that's a real luxury for us because he's large enough that he can do that. So he's able to connect with farmers that maybe they were growing a variety that their family's been growing for generations, but they just used it as a cover crop. Well, he can take that wheat and mill it and see how the flavor profile is. So that's
Harold is
something different.
Janie's.
Yeah,
Sorry.
he's from Janie's Mill.
The Ratterman's bread, which is what's in Dexter in Michigan here, which is close to where I am, they also buy from Janie's. So that's great.
Yeah, Janie's has we always joke that because we were like their customer zero. So
Wow.
they came and spent time at the bakery when they were trying to figure out how how they were going to mill the grain and how that was going to market it. So we really worked in tandem to try and like do some product testing for them to help refine the flour. And then, they've done all the heavy lifting and the hard work, but we just did the testing of their different milling.
That's
That's
great.
great. I do want to talk a little bit about your bakery, but first I want to share the story of how I found you. And I think it's kind
Oh
of the
yeah.
funniest story. So, I've been gluten sensitive for a while. So I was gluten free for a long time and I hated the gluten free breads, like any gluten free products. I mean, I feel bad for the people that are celiac and don't have a choice, but they're just so dense and there's so many ingredients and they don't taste like bread. So I just had given up bread altogether and I was very sad about it. And so I think I had read something, and this is a while back, that sourdough bread can be tolerated by some people that are gluten sensitive. But I'm like, I want real sourdough. I want to make sure that it's like real sourdough so I can eat it and I'm going to feel okay. So I Googled what is the best sourdough in the north suburbs of Chicago, and up came Hewn Bakery. So
That's good.
I did all this like reading about you guys. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to Hewn. And I'd only, I think, kind of gotten as far to realize that you guys were in Evanston. So I like put a little note in my phone and I made a little post-it for myself and I'm like, I'm gonna get to Hewn. One day I'm gonna get there. I happen to be going to our corporate office for my full-time job, which is in Evanston. And I was driving back to my office and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, there's you right here. There happened to be a parking spot right in front. I'm like, okay, I'm pulling in. I walked in the door. I was like a kid in a candy shop. The person who greeted me was so nice. And she's like, hi, can I help you? I'm like, yes, I'd like to buy some sourdough. And she spread her arms out wide and she's like, it's all sourdough. And I was like
Yeah,
in heaven. I'm like, I don't know what to buy right now. Yeah, it was so fun. So I've
that's
been going there
great.
ever since. And now I know you've got other locations. So sometimes I visit those too. It was fabulous. And since then, like I keep dragging all my friends there. Like, oh, you have to come here. You have to try this bread.
That's right.
So explain to everybody why people who are gluten sensitive can sometimes tolerate the sourdough bread.
So that's kind of like a two-pronged answer that I'll give you. One is like kind of what we talked about with the sourdough, right? The yeast kind of like helping to do some of the digestion, the pre-digestion ahead of time as it's breaking down. Um, when it's essentially fermenting and the bread is creating those really nice gluten strands. But the second for me that I really believe, and that's why I say like don't just go for like the sourdough breads, make sure that the grains that they're using are free of glyphosate because I feel like if I could just explain for you, you'll understand why I say that. So I honestly did not realize that. So let's dig into like GMOs, right? So there is no genetically modified wheat that's available on the market. Okay. It doesn't exist. But what GMO actually means is like, if you think about a soybean, it means that it can tolerate getting sprayed with glyphosate, right? So it's genetically modified so that when it gets sprayed with glyphosate, and I'll say that the conventional name for that is Roundup. When it gets sprayed with that, the purpose of that chemical is to kill everything. It kills the weeds, right? it would also kill the soybean, but it's been genetically modified so it survives that. Okay. So wheat, there is no genetically modified wheat, but what farmers do, conventional farmers do when they're growing wheat, a few weeks before harvest, when the wheat looks beautiful and it's kind of like those amber waves of grains, that we sing about, they'll spray those fields with glyphosate. And the reason is because it actually will dry the wheat quicker. So it kills it essentially, right? So that's the point where the berries are all right. So what happens is it kills it, and it's able to drop the water content so they can harvest it before it rains. Because if it rains during that time when the wheat is really ready, they'll lose their crop. So they want to speed up the drying process. And when they spray it with glyphosate, it kills the wheat. They can harvest it quicker. But what happens is those berries that got sprayed with it or exposed to it, they don't get washed because you can't wash those. So what happens is it gets milled down into your grain and you eat it.
Wow.
So when you understand that conventional wheat is truly like, if it's been exposed to this process, you're consuming that and you're eating that, and it's creating a sensitivity, not because of the gluten. We've been eating gluten for thousands of years. It's because we've sprayed this chemical and your body is actually trying to like tell you, don't eat it. It's bad for you. So that's why I say like, it's not just sourdough. It's like understand like what is in your flour, and then your body will probably be much happier.
So it's really the combination of the sourdough and a heritage grain. That's like the winning combination.
And it's also like why in Europe, when people say that, gosh, they ate the bread, it's like in Europe, there's this misnomer that they're eating all sourdough. A lot of the bread in Europe is no longer sourdough 100% at all. It's just that their wheat, they have much stricter standards about what they can spray on their crops because they care about their consumers.
Right.
Yeah. We're actually doing an episode with a special guest to talk to us about glyphosate.
Okay, good.
And what it can do to our bodies, because I'm so tempted to just spew out some statistics and numbers, but I'm going to wait for that. But that's exactly right. It messes with your microbiome. So, and that's how we digest our food. Is with a lot of the bacteria that lives in our gut. And if we're interrupting that balance, I can see why someone might have an adverse reaction.
Book that I'll do a plug for, because this really kind of like, it did the heavy lifting of explaining this process to me, and it's called Whitewashed, and it's by a reporter who covered the farm beat for probably 20 years, a female reporter, and she kind of goes in depth. So I would recommend Whitewashed. Read that. When I was on my book tour, actually, every bookstore I went to, I asked the owners or the people there, like, give me one book that you really think I should read. And in Missouri, ironically, this is the book that they recommended I read, and it's eye-opening.
Tell us a bit about your book.
So the book, gosh, it seems so long ago now, because that came out, I worked on it in 2018 and it launched in 2019. And, as we know, that's like pre-pandemic, which everything in the world is different. And it's kind of funny because this book, I feel like now people are catching on more, right? They're understanding kind of what I was talking about, and a lot of the farmers I worked with, 6 years ago now. And so it's kind of amazing that heritage baking is probably more relevant today than it was back then, because people are willing to like really learn and understand, okay, how is wheat grown and what is the process? And so for the book itself, it's really like kind of like a very simple way to kind of get exposed to heritage grains, right? Because like back 6-7 years ago when I was working on this book, like recipes that you use, you have to adapt them when you're working with heritage grains, and especially if you're working with regional flour. And so this book was kind of like my attempt of like, here's how we do it at the bakery. Here's how to kind of like, essentially like a blueprint for how to work with different types of grains. Because now there's even more heritage varieties available all over the, country. Different regions have different things. So for me, it's like understand a hard or soft wheat, a winter, a spring wheat, and kind of like understanding these characteristics to help you learn how to modify a recipe. But my book has a bunch of different recipes, bread forward, and then even like pastries, muffins, that kind of stuff that you can make.
Did your sales go up during COVID?
That's what I was just going to ask, right? When everyone was trying to make sourdough.
Yeah, I mean, the cookbook definitely had a bump. I think now it's actually maybe more of a bump because I think people are really I mean, food is all in the news, right? I mean, we're not any healthier than we were,
That's
6 years
true.
ago, and we might even be more unhealthy because we also have a lot of big companies that have gobbled up all of the small farmers that and
Right.
small like
Yeah.
co-op grocery stores, right? Like we've
Hmm.
had more consolidation. So as a whole, I think consumers are not trusting that as much. So I think that the sales of the book, I'd say they're consistent. I'm not retiring off of the cookbook for sure, but it's nice to have.
Ellen's book is called Heritage Baking. Heritage Baking.
And
Okay.
will it help us? Will it help our listeners if we want to make sourdough but we're scared?
Yeah, the book actually will really, I would say for that, for the listeners, like just like read through the recipe probably two or three times before you even want to do anything, right? So that
Okay.
the steps aren't like the worst is when you're trying to do a recipe and like read it as you're trying to do it. And this is the recipe itself is several pages. So just like take your time, read it
Okay.
when you have like a bulk amount of time to just be uninterrupted.
Are you better off making your own starter, like with your heritage grain, more so than getting like someone else's starter? Like if someone's like, "Oh, I have a starter in my house. I'll give you some," but you don't know where it comes
I would
from.
I would say that I like to have people make their own starter because it's the kind of
Okay.
that first process where if you can be patient enough to develop your starter, then you're going to be patient enough to make your bread. And you also kind of understand the 10-day process of it ebbing and flowing, right? Where
Okay.
you kind of see it from nothing, like, and then you start seeing it look like pancake batter, and then you start seeing it become like really airy, like pillowy. But if you really are just like, I just really want to get a starter, I'd say, great, find a good friend that has one, get it, and then, consistently feed it. So either way.
Okay. Maybe I'll brave it, but for now, tomorrow I'm planning on going to Hewn to get my bread.
Yeah,
Yes.
great.
Which is your favorite loaf there? I need to know.
It's funny. It's like I change kind of, I feel like every few years. So it used to always just be the blonde loaf, right? That I would get.
I
Then
get the
it would
blonde
always
loaf a
be,
lot.
yeah, I love that. Obviously, it was the country loaf initially. That was always my go-to. And now what I get all the time, and it sounds bad in a way, is I get the blonde pan loaf
Oh, I've
because
gotten
then I
that for
get
my
it.
kids. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I love like I have that up here with me where I get it sliced and then I
Hmm.
always have it. I love that. It's got
Yeah.
the thing I
Sounds like
like
it's
about
good
it
for a
is
sandwich.
our pan. Yeah, it's great for a sandwich, and the pans we spray them with a little bit of like olive oil. So it's just I just like the crunchy, the crust of it has a little bit more of a flavor. But then
Yum.
sometimes I'll go for the rye, I just want a nice rye bread.
And which one is the one that has the einkorn in it? That's the Midwest
That's our
blend?
Midwest blend. Yep.
I'm gonna get that one and try that one
Another
this
one
week.
that's really delicious is the Durham with sesame
Oh.
seeds. So
Oh.
that one is delicious. If you just want something that's a lot more nutty, the Durham is like a really obviously a nutty flavor, but then the sesame seeds toasted, it's phenomenal.
Oh.
Yum.
Okay.
That also
Maybe I'll be
sounds
getting
good.
2 loaves tomorrow.
Stacey, when I come in town in October, you can get me a couple loaves.
I'll get you some more loaves.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm addicted.
Ellen, we like to ask our guests two final questions. If you could give our listeners one action item from today's episode, one call to action, what would it be?
I think it would be to find a farmer in your region that's growing a wheat variety that you can connect with. So I'll leave the definition of region loose but get out and find a local grain farmer. And then I'd love to hear like what those varieties are that listeners connected with.
Can I ask
Great.
a question about that actually now that I'm thinking about it? And I'm thinking about the flour that's in my pantry that we use when we make pancakes and cakes and cookies. Even if it's organic, is that like what flour would you recommend that we use for just our everyday baking?
I mean, that's heritage baking, right? It's switching your flours to work with,
Okay.
we didn't even touch about stone milled. all of the flours that I was referring to, they're stone milled. So you're getting the bran and germ, which is where all the nutrients are. And so kind of the conventional, even organic flour, it's roller milled. So they separate that into 3 buckets, and then they'll reconstitute it into what their version of whole wheat is. Where a stone milled, you'll get like one field, they'll take that berry, they'll mill it down, and that whole field's berry is right in your whole wheat. So like it is actually, I guess my call would be even more broad than is like find how to transfer out your conventional wheat, be it whatever name brand, even if it's organic. There's a lot of loopholes in the organic standard once the federal government took it over. And I kind of referred to that at the beginning of this, that once the federal government took over the organic standard, then it stopped being truly 100% organic. So you could buy flour from Janie's. They'll mail it to you. You can get it. They send it in a U.S. Post box, one rate. Order a 10-pound bag. They have all-purpose. They have different flours for different uses. The all-purpose is a great general one for pancakes and everything. And that's kind of what I was referring to with recipes. Sometimes you have to change the amount of liquid that you add because it has more, the stone milled flour has more of the bran and germ, which absorbs more of the water, right? So it absorbs it differently. The white flour, it's basically just the white part of it. It's the endosperm.
Okay. So I need to find a local friend to split a 10-pound bag with me.
That's it. Yeah, right.
Without the nutrients. The white flour doesn't have the nutrients, doesn't have the fiber. That's why a lot of it's enriched because everything's gone.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I'm taking that advice.
Yeah, it's good advice.
Thank you.
Me too, actually. Thank you.
Good.
Okay. So our last question that we ask is, so here at the podcast, we like to say, don't panic, just pivot. Would you like to share a change or a pivot in your life that you're proud of?
I think the pivot that I'm most proud of is just, I go with what I'm curious to learn. And then I don't think about, well, where's this going to take me? What's the end result? It's just, I want to learn this. I'm going to see where it goes and just dive full passion into that learning. Like, whatever it is, like right now I'm trying to learn, well, I don't even want to know what I'm learning, but I would say,
yes, we do. We do want to know.
Like instead of this sense of pivoting, just find what you're passionate about at this moment and don't care about the end result. Just like appreciate that you're learning something new. And then you never know what's going to come from that.
So be willing to take a pivot, maybe.
Be open to the pivot. Yeah, like you know what? Don't even think of it as a pivot. Just think of it as your like growth of learning. You just are on this journey to always learn and be kind of challenged and a little bit uncomfortable. And don't give up when you're learning something new.
That's amazing advice.
It's a good reminder. Yeah, it's okay to be uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ellen, this has been really nice.
Ellen. This has been so fun and so educational. And like I said, I'm a huge fan of yours.
Well, I so appreciate, first off, you guys taking the time to talk to me. And this has been a lot of fun. And I honestly am kind of humbled with how much you like our bakery. It's great. It's customers like you that help keep us in business.
Thank you for listening to the Digestible Podcast with today's guest, Ellen King of Hewn Bread. If you're ever in the Chicagoland area, definitely visit one of their locations. And if not, and you'd like to visit them online, you can do so at www.hewnbread.com. If you like today's episode, please share us with others. It's the best compliment you can give us. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at info@digestiblestrategies.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and remember, don't panic, just pivot. The content shared on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are not medical professionals, and the views expressed here are not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any health conditions. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making any health-related decisions.